this is just not working. Let me not try to make it work. Let me just pivot as I move on in my career and life and, whatever continues to happen next. I try to keep that in mind. Okay. I'm a fighter. And I always have my foot on the gas, but sometimes I need to take stock early on and say, does this make sense? Is it working? Or are there any signs that it might not work?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. I'm your host, J. Michael Fischer Jr. There are problems hiding in plain sight, things that we interact with every day, but we rarely question. And sometimes those problems turn into an entirely new category of business. Today's conversation is really about what it looks like to see one of those opportunities and actually build something around it. I'm joined by Amy Hedrick, CEO and founder of Cleanbox Technology, a company focused on solving a problem most people don't think about, the hygiene and safety of shared devices, from virtual reality headsets to other high-touch technology. Amy, it's great to have you on.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, see, we got on. We talked about it a little bit before you jumped on. You've been bi-coastal. You spend a lot of your time in Manhattan. What were you doing before Cleanbox, and then how did you end up here?
I've definitely taken the road less traveled, and really that's because I've followed opportunities as they've come my way, I think is the best way to put it.
Love that.
But directly before I started the company, I was working for a think tank, writing about technology, how it would start to influence global consumer behavior. And the point of that was to really educate C-suite on tech and think forward, because large companies, of course, take time to change, and you need to anticipate and try to plan for that. And during a visit to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, I tried on a Oculus Quest. And so it would have been around 2015 or so. And I thought, this is amazing. This, the way we learn, this could impact the way we learn, the way we engage, the way we do R&D and so many things. And I just was enamored with the technology. And so I came back, and at the same time, I had a strong relationship with the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. And I envisioned that this tech could change how we learn. So instead of going to a museum and just reading a plaque, you start to engage with the history, or you start to engage with the science. And when you see it, a world like that you're fully immersed in, the possibilities seemed endless. And of course, there's a long way from idea to execution, but along the way, looking at the barriers of entry for actually utilizing that in an enterprise way, and then being able to scale it. What are some of the first barriers? And the very first one, surprisingly, was not the technology itself. It was risk mitigation, surprisingly to me. So that was the first barrier, was this is great. So let's say we could make this scalable. How do we protect from contagions that are transferred from person to person? When you have millions of people utilizing a shared device or shared devices, you have to start thinking of all of those types of things from a business point of view. And that's where the company originated.
So, when did you really feel like that? When did it really click that this was a real opportunity? Because now, you hear all the time people talk about how dirty your cell phone is. And I've thought about this kind of stuff. So, when did it really click for you that it's okay, if we were going to start using this at scale, this is something we really need to worry about?
Very early on, even though I hadn't really, to be honest, thought of that as a problem before, I started to really do the numbers. And when you think about when 100 people share a device, that's one thing. That's one type of risk. When you're talking millions, or not only just a shared device, but the chain of a custody chain for a device, and who touches it and when and how. And it really started to make sense as thinking about originally a virtual reality or augmented reality headset, but then other types of devices that we share, tablets in hospitals, headsets, earphones, Bose headsets on an airplane type of thing. It really seemed like, wow, there's a niche market here that would be solving maybe multiple types of problems. And so, going from first seeing that to start develop the product. As I did that, I started exploring and talking to business owners and talking to the interesting thing about starting where we did is that we naturally became involved in about 15 industries just organically at the very beginning
What
because
were
everybody
some of those
was.
industries, if you don't mind just...
Yeah, of course. Well, right now, our top three are healthcare, government, and education. But at the same time, I know, for example, some of the aerospace companies have used immersive technology for R&D. So cut down in R&D development, product development time, or training, technical skills training, soft skills training. In healthcare, patient therapy, such as, PTSD type of therapy, as well as, a staff training or physician education or practice. So the possibilities and the use cases were seemingly endless. So we started getting outreach and engaging with hospital systems, at the same time museums, at the same time entertainment centers and airlines and other types of manufacturing. So it just became very interesting to start thinking about the problem in an entirely new way.
Very cool. Like, just break it down really simple. What is Cleanbox? Obviously I can understand what the problem it's, that it's solving, but how does it work? What is the process, and maybe take us to an actual application?
Absolutely. We focus on all of our products are UVC LED based. So we design around the use of UVC in an LED. And just for a quick technical clarity, UV, there's different types of UV. There's UVA, B, and C. And C is the range of wavelength that we use because it is the most effective against a range of contagions. We chose LED for a number of reasons because you could engineer with LEDs in a way that you cannot with UV bulbs. You can create designs that are both effective as effective against contagions as they are safe for the products. So that was an important element of why did we start our R&D with LEDs, because we needed to make sure that first of all, anybody could use it. It didn't require special handling, so it could be used in a public space, and that it didn't damage the product that it was disinfecting. So all of our products are UVC LED based. We started our IP development in 2015, so we have over 50 global patents in that. So we started early on. And then, and a practical example, just to start in the virtual or immersive tech space, virtual reality, which is part of immersive tech. A couple of healthcare systems, as an example, early on started using headsets for patient therapy. And the patient therapy at a clinic or a hospital or whatever. And you would need to disinfect those headsets between each user in order to make sure that you're doing it safely and they can use it safely. So if we can accomplish that without using chemicals, heat, liquids, or extensive manual labor, it's solving not only that they can use the tech safely, but you're solving a workflow problem at the same time. And I would say that especially just to talk a little more about healthcare, the VA uses immersive tech a lot. They have been very, very progressive about that, and they've been seeing phenomenal results. So we see that growing as one specific use case. And then on a non-XR like a shared headset, think about, the headsets that are used in call centers or security centers. That's another shared device that requires a very rapid turnaround and a lot of people using the same device. Just a couple of examples.
Very cool. So how long does it take to clean a device? I mean, can you do it kind of, I'm thinking like at a museum, you finish it, you put it into, like, how quickly does it turn around?
Our standard cycle time is 1 minute. With 1 minute, we are able to reach a very high level of disinfection on a range of contagions, viruses, fungi, bacteria, all the gross stuff that nobody wants to think about. And yeah, so we really work to make our products very, very simple and easy to use so that, let's just say you have an intern working for you or seasonal staff or somebody in high school who's, doing a summer job. You want to make sure that they can actually use the product as well. All you do is push the button and that's it. And so it has safety mechanisms built in. So, you're never exposed to anything that you shouldn't be. And very simple. That's the whole goal. Make it easy.
Very cool. So, I mean, you guys, this was ahead of, obviously the global pandemic in 2020 where, I don't know about you. I remember when we didn't know what was going on, I was literally sanitizing groceries that I was bringing into the house because I didn't know, right, what it was. Was any of this addressed, were there any competitors? Were there anybody else that were trying to do something similar with this? And I guess it's a two-part question. Was anybody else doing this kind of before or in this space? And after 2020, did this radically shift and kind of push it further ahead?
Well, yes, you're correct. We did start this before the global pandemic. And because we weren't thinking, of course, of that, we were
Of course
thinking
not.
of other things like pink eye and norovirus and all
Yeah.
of those other things that also can make us sick. I would say that, the pandemic definitely put a spotlight on things. But I would say it was also kind of a double-edged sword. There was also a lot of confusion, a lot of education about UV. Suddenly people were like, oh, what is UV and what does it do and how does it work? But then there was also a lot of confusion about it because there are different types of UV and form factors make a difference and dosage makes a difference. And their knockoff products don't really work and you have to explain why. So I would say that I think it's great to think about these things because we live in a very connected world. The fact that I can get on a plane in an hour and be some other part of the country in 15 hours,
It's crazy.
is just an exclamation point. We're very connected. And so we think of that in terms of the ways that we want to keep ourselves healthy and have a better quality of life and live longer and have a stronger immune system. And what we're exposed to on a regular basis really does have a strong impact on that. And I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but at the
That's
time
great.
when we started the business, we were doing it because we didn't see anything else out there. And so that's why I thought, well, it could be a great business opportunity. Let's be the pick and shovel in this industry, if you will. And, there after COVID, we definitely saw, like a bulb in a box kind of product. And there are applications for certain things that can make sense. But where we focused is make it easy, make sure it doesn't damage whatever it's being disinfected, and make it fast. And so, we have several products on the market that are designed for slightly different form factors just to solve different business needs.
After being in this business now for, I guess over 10 years now, right? Is there anything that really surprised you as you got deeper into the space?
I would say there's always something that's going to surprise you. I think when you come to surprises is twofold. One is how much education was important to share. Because when you think about UV disinfection as an example, there's both the technical and science component of it that you really have to express properly in order for your customer to know that they're getting a product that works and it does what it says it does. That education part, I have been a little surprised about some of that requirement and messaging around that and what people understand versus what you think you're telling them. And there, that's adjustment. That's, I think, probably pretty normal. Some of the more challenges that I would say come on the fact that we're hardware and manufacturing is a very big animal to
Mm,
to wrangle. And we've always been manufactured in the US. That has, definitely had its challenges, some benefits, supply chain management, things that are outside of your control that I would say are the biggest surprises. And then as the world changes and turns and industries, accelerate or soften economies and macroeconomics, those all impact what your business looks like. I don't know if this was a surprise, maybe just the fact that we are in multiple industries has really helped us during times where one industry might be softer than another one, and we'll see pickup in this vertical versus another.
very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but, coming up with an idea is one thing, but then actually starting a business is another. Can you kind of get into that? Like, how did you actually begin to form this business and what did it take? Did you take on early investors in the beginning? Like, how did this whole thing come to be?
When I started it, I was kind of doing it on the side and reaching out to, I don't know about friends and family, but kind of that kind of H&I kind of here's an idea, here's a prototype, here's a couple of patents. Are you interested? Kind of thing. And I would say, starting there, and then realizing all of the work that goes into actually building a product. Our original product was just a kind of can we make this out of the materials in the garage kind of thing? And then we did. And, then getting market feedback and saying, okay, well, actually this should also incorporate charging. This should also incorporate a drawing element. And that was customer feedback, and taking that from the idea to creating a physical prototype that looked right, to creating a physical prototype that looked right and could run. Those are very, very different processes. And it takes a lot longer than you would think.
How
And then
long
you have
did
to
it take?
convert. Well, the first prototype, I would say early on, we had some design ideas and patent around, concepts and things like that, which we've grown on. The first year or so, just, product person tinkering around with things and trying different things. The first prototype that we started showcasing was in 2018. And then we started selling our first commercial product the end of 2019. So, idea to prototype 1 to prototype 5. And then you have to think about manufacturing, which is often very different. Your build of materials can be 100 pieces, let's say. Then you have to think about where each piece comes from and does it make sense and what is the cost impact. And those are the things that are really in the weeds, the business side, that are not as fun to think about when you're coming up with all these brilliant ideas. You think, oh, this would be great to have. We could do this. And then you have to get to execution. I think a lot of ideas can die in that innovation to execution gap.
Yep.
And so very happy that, you're able to bridge that gap and get there, but it's a lot of hard work.
So that must have been pretty challenging though. So you really started going to market with this at the end of 2019, and then all of a sudden the whole world shuts down. What was it like? I mean, obviously I'm thinking at that point in time, this is a technology that everybody would want to get behind, but how are you selling something physical in a virtual
Right.
manner? Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So prior to the shutdown, I had been on the road going to conferences, trade shows with a prototype and talking to people. And I was going to conferences around the world. I was all over the US, all over Europe. I went to South Africa, Middle East. I mean, I was, from my vision originally, I thought this is maybe in retrospect, I could have started with the United States and then moved on, but I saw it as a technology that was being adopted simultaneously everywhere. And it made a lot of sense to say, hey, we have this. And if you're a multinational company, you might have locations in all of these countries that I'm going to. And I think, and because I did that, we had customers right away. When the pandemic hit, we saw people coming back and they had just recently seen me within the last year. So we were top of mind, or at least they're like, oh, wait, we know of a company that has a product that can help. And it was very challenging for us because we had not really raised very much money at that point. It was, we were definitely bootstrapping everything that we did. And the manufacturing is cost the manufacturing. We had professional. Of course, we started early on and we had a local manufacturer that we worked with and we still work with these manufacturers to this day, local meaning US. And, so that was definitely challenging. And some of the bigger challenges were that we had been a startup, so we didn't have VC capital. Our bank was like, well, you don't have enough history to qualify for what we needed to qualify for. And so everything is, it was one of the good problems to have, I suppose, but still is a problem you have to figure out. And that was our biggest thing. And then we were all kind of on lockdown. I mentioned before I was bi-coastal, so I happened to be in California at the time. Supposed to go back to New York for jury duty. Obviously that didn't happen and I kind of got stuck there. And so everything was just happening kind of from the home office, if you will. And so being able to, hire people quickly to address sales and orders, it was a challenge and we did, what we could. And it was an interesting experience.
So what did it take? I mean, obviously, these products are so, it must be challenging to deliver at such a high level, especially when it comes to safety. I mean, how do you manage that? And especially if you're managing that out of your home office?
Well, we were managing all the nuts and bolts from the home office, but we tapped in early on to, like I said, a manufacturing company that did quality work. We had our certifications already in process, so all of our products with our UL certifications, our CE marks, and all of that. We had done our homework and built up to what we knew we needed for a global product delivery. And so we had planned on that side. And really then it was a matter of pushing. And early on, some of our products too were being used in ways that, we hadn't anticipated, like in hospitals. Somebody had bought it for their innovation center. And then they're like, well, we just donated these all to our local hospital for PPE disinfection. And so we said, well, if you're going to try that here, do these other things as well to help them understand, what it would work for and then what they needed to augment. So again, were these business challenges I would have anticipated? Not remotely.
Yeah,
And there was a lot of learning on the job.
for sure. So since that time, I mean, how has the company scaled and grown since then?
Well, we've taken a private investment. We have grown revenue-based growth. We released new products that were already, in our innovation pipeline. We just kind of pushed the timeline forward a little bit. And it's been challenging. I think that there's a lot of scalability when you think that the big scalable components have to do with manufacturing and being able to, manufacture enough product at once to reduce your COGS, to increase those margins, to satisfy your distributors, et cetera. And we've just done that in pieces, in bite-sized pieces that we could handle. And we've grown in that way. And we've mostly been able to meet our customers' timelines. There are times that we've been, we're like, oh, we had a manufacturing delay that was unavoidable and it'll be, another 4 weeks or things like that. But because we've been enterprise historically, it does help with the, people will say, okay, well, we're a business. We can wait another 4 weeks. It might be a little different with a direct to consumer product.
Are you guys thinking about doing that? I mean, I would think something like a D2C product for cell phones would be amazing. Is that on the horizon?
Yes, actually, we have two products that are direct to consumer or a B2C, and they are for different types of shared devices. They're mobile. One of them is on our website now. The other one is not quite yet. One will be released later this year. The other one probably early next year. And that is really because there's there's a big gap there in these different markets that we serve, that where we see opportunity and where, the price point at a consumer or a prosumer price point makes a lot of sense. So yes, we've got ideas.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's talk about Amy, herself here. What habits or ways of operating really help you stay ahead?
Well, I think coming into this, you have to wear a lot of hats, and I'm still wearing a lot of hats. And I think the biggest thing that has served me well is knowing that from the very beginning and being willing to say, okay, I'm going to have to do this and do this and do this and do this and learn and just say, this is a learning curve. I'm going to try to shorten it and do whatever is necessary to do that. And being involved. I think for me, it's been really important to, again, try to be as hands off as possible when I can and let the professionals that I hire to do certain things do what they do best, but also know what they're doing so that I can have those higher level conversations at the same level. And I've also become very involved in industry associations. For example, I've been a longtime member of the IUVA, the International UV Association. I'm part of UV Safe, which is focused on promoting the use of LEDs as a sustainable disinfection or a sustainable mechanism for product. I've been actively involved in ASTM standards creation and supporting education, looking at the business from the hands-on, okay, let's build this business up into something bigger, and also trying to think long-term big picture and say the important things for the industry to grow are also these things, which might take 3 to 5 years. So let me start them now. That's really how I've kept going, and hopefully in the end it'll serve me well.
I know it will. I know it will for sure. So can you give us an example of a challenge that really helped shape the way that you lead?
So many, so many examples. Well, I would say one thing that I have learned is when you're starting a business, it's a startup and everybody's got to be in it to win it. And that's hard to find. And so understanding when, a person or somebody is right for the business is not always something right away. So you can make mistakes and or they can make a mistake saying, I think I'm right for this, but no, actually I'm not. Being flexible with that. It's hard to do because it has such immediate business impact. It's not like working for a large company where if someone comes and says, this job's not right for me, I can move on. And nobody really feels the pain of that. It's very different with a startup and a small business and as you grow. So I think some of the challenges that I've had to learn are those things can happen at any time for any reason, and be ready, and also just learn something new when that happens. You just have to take stock at the moment and say, okay, now let's just shift this, or how can we pivot and plan for whatever we actually really need.
So is there any lessons that took longer than expected to learn?
How to plan around the unknown And I don't know that, I mean, if you've been through it before, you might be better at being faster at it.
Yeah.
So there are some things that, like, like staffing wise, I might have said, okay, well, let's try this and let's give it a little more time. I think there's a lot of value in saying, recognizing quickly this is working, whether it be staffing or operational or manufacturing or logistics, making quick decisions. This is working. This is just not working. Let me not try to make it work. Let me just pivot as I move on in my career and life and, whatever continues to happen next. I try to keep that in mind. Okay. I'm a fighter. And I always have my foot on the gas, but sometimes I need to take stock early on and say, does this make sense? Is it working? Or are there any signs that it might not work?
It's a big takeaway that I've had from this conversation is your gift. I call it your gift, that you've been able to identify an opportunity from outside of something. You saw one thing and then you saw this other opportunity that was there. Just for our listeners here, when if we have a founder or a leader who's trying to evaluate opportunities, what should you look for? And what I mean is, like, how do you just, distinguish like real problems from just like interesting ideas?
That's the question, isn't it? That's the main question. And I think sometimes you have to just give yourself enough time to determine if it's an interesting idea or a real problem. And then you also need to take a real evaluation of the market that you're starting with and say, are they ready to address this problem? Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have to think, and then you have to dive in a little deeper and say, is this going to be a cost issue for them? Or is this, what is going to be driving their purchase choice? Is that going to be cost savings? Because, humans don't like change. That's kind of human 101. We don't like to change.
Exactly.
We kind of like to do what we're doing. And so change sometimes is forced on us and sometimes it's a process. So I think, the first thing is just realizing that you need to give yourself enough time to determine if this is a good idea and if it has business legs.
Mm-hmm.
And then say, okay, this has business legs. It's going to take 5 years, or this has business legs, but it might take 10. And these are the reasons.
Now, I have to ask you the question because I'm a big believer in having a great group of people around you to bounce ideas off of and to, like, I don't know, like I always say, idiot test my great ideas. Who do you have around you that you talk to about these different things and to say, is this just a crazy idea, or wow, this actually has legs?
Well, the answer has changed over the course of the business for sure. Yeah. But I think, I chat with my partner. I run ideas by him. Is this good or is this not good? And if he says not good, I definitely argue the point. I say, no, actually, it's brilliant. And this is why, but it makes me second guess. Is it a smart idea or not? Or, am I communicating it properly? And, I do have an advisory team that I chat with about different things. Some of my advisory team, for example, is a microbiologist. And so I say, really, what's the biggest problem that you're seeing right now in healthcare that needs to be addressed in hospitals for like HAIs, hospital or healthcare acquired infections? And sometimes it's not what I think. So I bounce like very specific technical ideas off different people. And, hey, is the hospital ready to buy this way? And if so, who would be the approver on the budget side? Or the general ideas? It's kind of a small group of people, but I do try to take advantage of my advisory team and even my customer base that have become, more than customers, friendly and associates that I can say, are you guys really seeing this need? I'll give you a really great last example. One of our new products, which a direct to consumer, but also a B2B2C, I would say. And, I've said for this particular vertical in healthcare, they're very, very budget constrained. And so would this product better suit your need than our core enterprise line? And bounce that through all of the contacts I have in that industry, through these people that have become friends over the years. And it has been the most valuable thing I ever could have done, because sometimes my assumptions are wrong, even though I know the industry, I can get it wrong.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's amazing. So for those listening who want to learn more about what you're building at Cleanbox or want to connect with you or the company, where's the best place for them to go?
Our website is cleanboxtech.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I try to be as active as I have time for, but yeah, it's Amy Hedrick on LinkedIn. And I always love to hear from people. If you have any great ideas or feedback, I love to hear that too, because I figure if I become a smarter, better person, it can't hurt.
That's amazing. So thank you so much for that, Amy. And for those who are listening, if you're a business owner or operator thinking about how these kinds of decisions impact your business, whether it's growth, capital, or long-term strategy, that's exactly the kind of conversations that I have every single day. So if you want a second perspective or someone just to think through it with, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to have a conversation. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today on the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. I wish you the best and keep solving those problems that not everybody is seeing. I think that's a brilliant gift that you have, my friend.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. It's wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, let's continue to build something meaningful together. Thanks a lot.